morning, everyone, and welcome to this final EDLab webinar, The Road Ahead to a European Degree. We are very pleased to see so many of you online with us this morning, and I will briefly introduce, let's say, the agenda and the panelists of this webinar. I'm Alessandra Gallerano. I work at the University of Padua, and we have been part of the EDLab consortia over the last year, and also leading a bit the organization of these webinars. So this morning with us, next slide please, we have 6 speakers. So Fernando Galan is the Secretary General of the Arcus European University Alliance. Then with us also from the University of Ghent, Andries Verspeten and Lotte Lehnen. Then we have 2 academics that are now piloting the issue of the European degree label. Isabel Cavago from the University of Algarve and Bart Mercy from Ghent University. And also here with us, and special thanks to him, from the European Commission, DG EAC, Yamael Bidot. So together with Andries, I'm going to moderate this session, and we are also, of course, hoping to get many questions from your side. So for the questions, you can use the question and answer box that you can find on the Zoom bar at the bottom. So you can type in your questions, and we will answer the question at the end of the webinar. So there will be ample time for collecting your questions. If you have any technical issue or other smaller questions, you can of course also use the chat. So looking at the agenda for this morning, we will have a short introduction to the EDLab project. We are now at the end of the EDLab experience, let's say, but also only the starting point of a much wider, let's say, adventure that we will present soon. Then we will look in particular at the testing of the label and the label certificate, and some lessons learned regarding the compliance and the criteria that we have tested for the European degree label. Then, of course, we'll give the floor to the program coordinators to provide their view and their insights regarding the testing of the label and the label certificate. And finally, the word to Yamael Bidot to present the very recently published blueprint towards a European degree. As said, at the end we will have a question and answers, so feel free to type in your question in the question and answer box, and we will ask the panelists to answer that at the end. So I'll give the floor over to Fernando, and thank you again for being with us this morning.
Thank you, Alexandra. Good morning, everyone. Yes, this is a short introduction to the EDLab project from our side, also on behalf of Dorothy Katie from the Arcus Alliance, which we took this as a little adventure, as Alessandra said, running for the last few months. And we will explain a little bit the logic that we had behind the project. So if we go to the next slide, this is born from the European Strategy for Universities and some of the initiatives that were highlighted there. I will not stop too much here because I guess Jan-Mael will also tell us more about the policy context. But just as you can see there, one of the flagship initiatives was regarding the European degree label back at the time. And there was a call for policy experimentation projects that in the next slide, you can see that that was exactly where the EDLab project consortium applied to in order to pilot this idea that we found quite interesting at the time. So on the next slide, you can see the main objective of the project, which was to focus on the implementation of a possible European degree label, which will be for joint programs. And we focus at the time in 4 main countries because it's where we thought that there will be more room for improvement, let's put it that way, and also with a benchmark with colleagues from Ghent University, because also they had a huge experience and a variable policy context towards these kind of joint degrees. So we were trying to learn from their experience and also analyze these 4 main countries, but not only, so also in a broad perspective. If we go to the next slide, that's a very short summary, but as you can see, it was expected to last for 12 months. Now we will be for at least 14, but as Alessandra said, the consortium also got very much engaged, and probably we will continue our conversations and discussions about our experience. This brought together 4 alliances, which was also very interesting to collaborate between alliances. So Arcus, CEU, Utopia, and Enlight. And from those 4 alliances, we had 13 full partners from these 5 countries, so the 4 targeted countries plus Belgium, but also the rest of the colleagues from the alliances also as associated partners, and also other associated partners as national authorities, quality assurance agencies, networks of universities, student associations, and so on. So really looking to the stakeholders that could have a say and will have a very interesting say in this approach. If we go to the next slide, there you have the full list just for your records, but yeah, we will not stop here. Next slide. And here you have the list of associations that associated partners to the project that, as you can see, it was quite a relevant bunch of colleagues that help us to develop and participated in our conversations. So from networks, as I said, to national authorities, QA agencies that also you will learn that they will have probably a role on that, the student associations as the main target, let's say, of the whole initiative, alumni associations, also graduates from different joint programs, but also recognition agencies as TIMEA, also, as I said, other universities within our alliances. So in the next slide, you will be able to see a little bit what we plan. And that was the plan back at least more than a year and a half ago. But the plan was indeed to check the suitability of the criteria that was proposed at the call back at the time, and see how they could be suitable for this idea of a possible European degree. So the idea was that we will try those criteria against the joint programs that we will map. And also, while testing this, we will try to also analyze the barriers that were existing in the different higher education systems that were in our target remit. Again, France, Italy, Portugal, and Spain, but not only. So with a broad picture about the whole European higher education area. The second part was also to try to see the possible global attractiveness. So what will be the added value of this European degree label? And the third one, but not the less interesting one, was also to try and pilot the issuing of the European degree. So try to see and define a procedure for issuing the European degree label, the label itself, but also testing it, because sometimes you can come with a huge, very wonderful procedure, but when you go down to actually implement it, you discover that you might not thought about certain things, or you didn't, or you discover other issues. Also to coming up with a set of recommendations out of this piloting. If we go to the next slide, you have a little bit the list of all deliverables and reports that have been produced during the EDLab project lifetime. You have them all in our website, so I will invite you to visit our website, to see also our social media channel, to have a look also to the previous webinars where some of these things were presented in depth. So you can see there, as I said, it was very much in line with the objectives, trying to have a look to the proposed criteria, see the barriers to those, seeing the added value of this possible European degree. And as I said, last but not least, and that's the topic for today, testing the issuing of the degree label, and also seeing what will be the barriers in this case and the added value of such a European degree label. If we go to the next slide, just very briefly, out of a little bit of context, which will you will learn more later during the webinar, but we have analyzed over almost 500 joint degree programs. So it's quite a piece of work, I must say. And our colleagues from Cadiz did an amazing, really piece of work there. And we analyze all those joint programs and try to see how they will fit into the initial list of proposed criteria. What we came out in a very summarized way, it's that we see this European degree label as a marker of excellence in European jointness. And I will highlight the jointness part because that's what has been driven us throughout the project. This will be a mark, and the added value precisely will be that this is something that brings us different cultures, different university traditions together. So the jointness part was where we saw the real added value of this level. That the label also could be beneficiary as an intermediate step towards a European degree on itself, and we will hear from Jamal the policy proposals that are coming out from the European Commission. But still, even though we see that and appreciate the horizon of the European degree, the label could be something useful in the meantime. Also, that this will be applicable for all higher education levels, so both EQF 6, 7, and 8, but also 5, and also a possible application to micro-credentials and short learning offers. So we focus mainly on the 3 cycles from Bologna, but also we saw that EQF level 5 and short modules could be also something interesting to have a look at. Very straightforward recommendation, and I think that the Commission really incorporated into the last versions, was to have clear criteria, that this will be mandatory, that this will be transparent and with simple formulations. And we appreciate very much that the Commission colleagues really took our feedback into consideration. And also that this will cover all aspects of the joint program. So from the organization and management to the learning experience, to focus on the students and the staff that give support to these joint programs and all the support services and the core values, obviously, that will have a distinctive picture when coming from the European higher education area. And also, last but not least, do not reinvent the wheel. This is something that I think we can all agree. So making use of the already existing tools like the ESGs and also the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs. So therefore, that this will be incorporated into current procedures and trustworthy institutions like ECHA Register Agency, that these programs will be also in the DECAR database, so in order to ensure transparency of the process. So I think that's briefly an introduction to the context, and I will pass it over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Fernando, for giving us such a clear picture of where we stand now and what we have worked on in the past months. And I must say it has been really a collective effort, and also the representatives we have here in the webinar today are to prove this collective effort of multi-stakeholder engagement. So I will now give the floor to Andries. So Ghent University has led, as Fernando was mentioning, the work on the testing of the label and the label certificate. So really looking at how should the label be, what form should the label take, how should it be given to the students, how should it be given to the programs, and so on. So I will give the floor to Andries now, and thank you for this.
Thank you very much, Alessandra, and happy to be here today. Also, good morning on my behalf and on Lotte. Lotte and myself, we will guide you indeed through the process of work package 4, the testing of the label and the label certificate, the processes that were behind this, and the main lessons we learned. Of course, Fernando already briefly touched upon those, but we will go into a bit more detail here. Yes, the key question. So when we were confronted with the fact that the European Commission launched the idea for a European degree label, and along with it, the label certificate, the key question that we were confronted with and that we tried to answer, is this feasible? And our approach to check this is by learning this by doing it. So we basically set for ourselves the aim to come to a pilot issuing of labor certificates within the time frame of the project. For this, it might be interesting to look a bit at the broader context. And so also Fernando already looked back somewhat. The first words on the European degree appeared in the European Commission communication of September 2020, achieving the European education area by 2025. Then we had the preliminary discussions in the mid of 2021. Then it was taken further through the European strategy for universities in the beginning of 22. And then finally, indeed, the pilot call itself was launched in the summer of 22. All university and alliances scrambled to be part of a project, and we were very happy to be able to join the project of our colleagues with whom we are here today. And the project basically started early 2023, which meant that within a very short, compressed time frame, we had to try and answer that question that I just formulated previously. Compressed time frame, not just that, but also the overall context globally is of course changing. We have global challenges that we feel we can only respond to as universities if we collaborate. So also the collaboration within joint programs within our educational offer is very important. So that also set the scene for trying and come up with answers under a short time frame. Has also to be said that the context itself was ever evolving, the policy context. We are happy to have Jan Mael here today with us to brief us further on the higher education package that was launched last week and to which our pilot projects were to provide input. But of course, within this 1 year of project, we were not operating in a vacuum. We were also in dialogue with the other projects and their aims and ambitions, and at the same time also in dialogue with the European Commission. Now, what were our key observations when starting, both as project partners and in particular also for us as Ghent University, is that, of course, it was already hinted to, we have our experience in offering integrated joint programs. Large part of it, at least for our university, is situated under the umbrella of the Erasmus Mundus action of the Erasmus Plus program. And there we also have experience in delivering joint diplomas and on these joint diplomas, joint degrees for as far as possible, also thanks to a rather facilitating Flemish regulatory context for our institution. Nonetheless, what we have observed, and that was of course also one of the starting points for the whole initiative, is that joint programs and with it all the administrative elements remain time-consuming and complicated to set up, and we always need very tailored solutions. You cannot easily copy-paste the solutions from one joint program to another, apart from the fact that maybe within the context of European alliances, European university alliances, this may become more easygoing. At least that's the whole idea behind the initiative. Not the only idea, of course, but one of the main ideas. So what we've seen is that the awarding of joint degrees is often still hampered. Throughout the years, we were often confronted with that through the respective regulatory context of the partner universities that we are cooperating with. And in particular, then, when we talk about certification, and this is what our work package was mainly about, is that we fall back on endless combinations of double, multiple, and joint degrees if single joint degrees, joint diplomas with a single joint degree are not possible, which hampers transparency and recognizability and possibly also recognition for students and credential evaluators and institutions looking into these diplomas. All in all, we took the new momentum that was created by the European University Initiative as a good opportunity to set this agenda, take it further forward, because of course these issues are not really new. They have been facilitated to a large part already by Bologna instruments, but always improvement is possible, and the European University Initiative brings that momentum. So some of you might question, why are we still talking about joint degrees? It's of course that we are ambitious in our cooperations when we set up joint program cooperation, we want this to be truly integrated, which means that we work on the basis of a joint design of a joint program, looking at jointly set learning outcomes, which is a very important element. And of course, also the implementation jointly, which is reflected in the criteria for the label, including important decisions such as a decision on the admission of students to the program and also the degree awarding, but which is only one of the elements that are also being reflected in the criteria for the label. So rendering this integrated nature of our transnational cooperation, we feel is very important. Of course, it is about the cooperation and the level to which this is integrated. But if you at the end award a degree, then you also want this degree to, as clearly as possible, render this joint effort. Again, as mentioned, so that this becomes easily recognizable for students, employers, and credential evaluators. Now, stepping into a project, what were the starting points for us to start this work on certification? As already mentioned by Fernando, through the EDLab project, we really consider the European degree label as a marker of excellence in jointness awarded to joint programs, which is one level of the whole endeavor. And then secondly, a label certificate is issued to students who graduated from a program that meets the criteria. Lotte will enter into more detail about all this, but it's important to mention here already that this label certificate, the way we conceived it now, is awarded alongside the actual joint diploma. What were then key questions alongside that we tried to answer is, how can such a label certificate render in the best possible way the jointness of our cooperation and also the Europeanness, because it's a European initiative? And then can we design the label certificate in a way that it basically reflects the potential of how an ideal joint diploma itself would look? In a way also to inspire policymakers in our respective member states and regions, that maybe that's also something that is on a longer term maybe feasible, that we step away from these various combinations of double, multiple degrees. We work towards joint degrees, joint diplomas. And not just that, they also completely render the transnational cooperation. They don't look national in a way, but they really show the fact that this is a joint endeavor offered by institutions in different member states, in different systems. Now then, final slide before I give the word to my colleague Lotte. Of course, then we had to look into the which activities do we undertake in our work package to come to replies to these questions. Is of course we looked into the sample of current joint diplomas as they are awarded in the joint programs that were also being screened under work package 2 of our project. So we surveyed the current practice, also with a view to design models for our pilot label certificate, because of course we then also wanted to have this pilot label certificate issued as a form of testing, including importantly a label logo. For this, we had to identify joint programs, and here also we relied heavily on the cooperation with the work package 2, identifying joint programs that meet the current criteria, the draft criteria as they were included in the call in the summer of 22. We also needed to provide guidance to the pilot issuers, and we will talk with them later today, so that we could test this issuing in practice and basically to come to conclusions on all this, conclusions that then would inform the policy development at the EU level and at member states level, conclusions on label criteria, label awarding process, and the design and issuing process of a potential future label certificate. And with this, I'm happy to give the floor to colleague Lotte, who will run us through the actual detailed work that took place under Work Package 4.
Yes, thank you, Andries. A bit more insights in how we tested the label and the label certificate, starting with the collection of data, of course, in order to create a baseline to create a design for the label certificate. So what did we do? Our first exploratory steps within Work Package 4 relate to targeting our EDLab higher education institutional partners, the full partners and the associated partners. We ask them to share with us samples of joint diplomas and joint diploma supplements that they currently use in practice for the transnational joint study programs, alongside information that we collected through a survey on the prescriptions that apply, institutional, regional, national prescriptions that apply to those EDLab higher education institution partners to issuing and awarding joint diplomas and joint degrees. This was our foundation to actually identify common denominators in the prescriptions and in the joint diplomas and joint diploma supplements as they are used in practice. So our foundation is really practice-oriented in order to determine which format, digital to paper-based or anything in between on the continuum, and which design, which look and feel would we give the label certificate in order to make it work acceptable for, in first instance, within EDLab or partner institutions. And we came quite quickly to the conclusion that we would have to opt for a complementary certificate, as digital experience was still quite limited, particularly in the framework of transnational joint study programs. But our vision is that for the design of the label certificate, we really want it to reflect the jointness of the joint program, the integrated nature, both in terms of the components that we would add to this complementary label certificate, as well as in terms of layout, this cohesiveness that we aim to see in the label certificate. That could then, as was already hinted upon by Andries, could be a source of inspiration for a future model of a joint diploma. This was our baseline, our basic data to design our label certificate. What did we conclude there? So within EDLab, as was already mentioned, it is a complementary standalone document that we issue alongside the joint diploma in PDF form, also allowing for print. What do we aim for this label certificate template to look like? We want a clear template that really properly reflects the transnational character of the joint program, the joint ownership of the consortium partners, the integrated nature that makes this label certificate also easily recognizable as this tangible output for the label initiative. At the same time, we noticed through the very different activities that we conducted within Work Package 4 that imposing one and one only template would not be 100% feasible, considering that we have this diversity in context, in prescriptions, in joint programs, in their setup, in their nature, a diversity that we welcome within EDLab. So we aim for the certificate to be clear for recognizability, but also adaptable in some form to the individual context of the joint programs while maintaining this recognizability because we use this one clear template. This adaptability of the certificate in view of the individual context of the joint program, we would see, or we would apply guiding principles that we have collected in some documents. So by applying the different principles, you can adapt this label certificate to your context. You can tailor it while not losing the recognizability. So we have a label certificate on the one hand with a clear vision, and we have accompanying it this guiding document. This guiding document stipulates the elements that, as per EDLab's vision, we aim to have included on the label certificate, the components, think logos, which logos, signatures, and so on, and also in terms of layout, this vision that we have to have it properly reflect jointness, one cohesive entirety, one whole. We have the elements stipulated in the guiding document, but the guiding document also provides a bit of a framework, some guidance to facilitate issuing the label certificates, because we know when issuing certificates, particularly with diplomas, joint diplomas for the joint programs, there are always some points of discussion, some points of contention that we have to take into account. So the guiding document that we developed within Work Package 4 accounts for those, explains how to go about the multilingualism, the language of the certificate, the number of signatures, one signature, one institution signing on behalf of the consortium, or including signatures of all partners, the type of signature, physical, digital, and so on, is really explained in the document, and on these points gives some flexibility to adapt the label certificate. At the same time, it was clear from the activities within Work Package 4 that this guiding document should not impose a regulatory framework in its own in order to keep this flexibility that is needed to be able to adapt to the individual context of the joint program. But by using this clear template, we do keep harmonization and avoid all different templates for the label certificate. In addition to label certificates combined with the guiding document, we within EDLab committed to the design of a label logo, which for us is a key visual identifier that could be used continuously, consistently throughout, and that really connects the label initiative to the label certificate. So the label logo could be used by the label programs in their communication and dissemination activities, could be used by the body or bodies that manage the label initiative on their centralized webpage, and so on, could be included or is to be included on the label certificate, and potentially in the future, if we should step away from the label certificate, it could be included on the joint diploma or joint diploma supplement. What do we aim to this logo to reflect? Of course, the principles of the label initiative, the jointness that we foresee is very important within EDLab, this integrated nature of these transnational joint study programs, to reflect the character of a label, because it is a label initiative. It's a European Union initiative, so we integrated the colors, blue and yellow, into a logo that we designed. The values underpinning the European education area, but also the European higher education area. For us, in our vision, it should be timeless, so a bit more abstract and also applicable in digital context with a view to future developments. So this would be the logo that we developed within EDLab and that we also included onto the label certificates that we pilot issued. We have our label certificate, our model, we have our guiding document, we have our logo. We took all of that material with us to ultimately pilot issue this joint European degree label certificate. Of course, the big question is, how did we do that? So issuing label certificates for us, again, just to re-emphasize, as a complementary certificate that is issued alongside the joint diploma, and in our vision, in pilot context, holds no value without representation alongside the joint diploma. So that's the authentication measure that we integrated here. Who delivers these European degree label certificates? That is the joint programs that comply with the minimum criteria as they initially stood. So we based ourselves throughout this whole exercise on the label criteria as they were published in the 2022 call for proposals for these pilot projects, the criteria that we were asked to test. And who will receive the label certificates? That would be the graduates, not the students, but the graduates of the labeled joint programs. They receive a personalized label certificate. Why did we feel this was important? We really wanted to test the process of issuing such label certificate. At the moment that we started this exercise, there was no framework, no guidelines available. So we really designed one ourselves, as Andries already mentioned, just learning by doing, to test the process. Is this feasible? Is this acceptable? These label certificates, which different steps do we have to take? Which actors do we have to involve, institutional and or beyond? Which obstacles do we foresee, administrative, technical, legal, etc.? In secondary order, this exercise of pilot issuing the label certificates throughout the design of the process that we designed really gave us additional insights into how these initial criteria were interpreted, especially by the joint programs coordinators that had to apply them, and how these joint program coordinators proposed to comply with them, which type of evidence they would foresee to prove compliance with the criteria. So a very insightful exercise. How did we do it? Of course, first, before going to pilot issuing the label certificate, we had to identify joint programs that comply with the minimum criteria as they were initially formulated. We had to find those programs, the labeled programs, and then secondly, this pilot issuing. What is important to emphasize in our viewpoint is that this was a pilot, experimental, very much so, and just to test the process in first instance in order to provide some recommendations for a future procedure. And by all means, this process and the selection, the ultimate selection for participating in the pilot issuing exercise is no way a complete picture of joint programs that are currently running that either meet or do not meet the criteria. The main viewpoint was to test the process. How did we identify these joint programs? We worked very closely with the colleagues from Work Package 2 from the University of Cadiz, with Laura Howard, because she already conducted a survey as part of Work Package 2, whereby the joint program coordinators were invited to compare their program against both minimum and optional criteria. And the idea at the time was that we would use the results from that self-assessment, that survey, to select candidates for the pilot issuing exercise. It was already quite clear from a first initial analysis of the results of that compliance survey that misinterpretations of the criteria may have occurred in this self-screening exercise, resulting in false no's, false yeses, and so on. So we really knew that we had to take it a step further in order to identify actually compliant joint programs beyond the mere self-assessment. So we, stepwise, in a sort of process of elimination, gathered further evidence to verify which programs would comply or not. It was a quite time-consuming exercise, but I will try to go over it a bit more briefly. Based on the results of the compliancy survey, we had our long list of 25 joint programs that self-indicated to meet the minimum criteria. Very important to emphasize that we focused on the minimum criteria only. If we were to include the optional criteria as well at the time, it would have reduced the numbers significantly. So we focused on the minimum criteria, initially 25 joint programs. First shift that we made was based on checking compliance with one criterion in particular, it being the joint degree criterion, that we actually defined quite restrictively. We asked these 25 joint programs whether they award a joint diploma that we defined as one single document awarded by all degree awarding partners, no double, no multiple degrees, and no combination of double, multiple, and joint degrees. So really one single document. And that remarkably shortened our list quite immediately from 25 to only 7 joint programs remaining. Here is an overview of the type of at EQF levels that we had in the long list versus in the short list. So unfortunately, we couldn't take any bachelor's or joint doctoral programs with us in the next phase. So we ended up with 7 joint master's programs, of which, not surprisingly, maybe 6 were Erasmus Mundus. We, at that time, only checked the compliance with one particular criterion, the joint degree criterion, although very important also in this label initiative. We needed, of course, to check the compliance with all the other remaining minimum criteria still. And in order to do that, we set up video calls together with Laura from Work Package 2, with the 7 joint program coordinators that ended up on the short list. Before we could do the video calls and go in depth on the compliance with all of the different criteria, we knew we had to develop some initial first edition of guidelines in order to create a common understanding of the criteria, in order to create a uniform assessment of compliance with the criteria in view of comparing the different programs, the comparability of the data. So we did so in line with ESGs, in line with European approach principles, and so on. We developed a first edition of guidelines that we use to facilitate the interviews. What can we conclude from this identification exercise related to the formulation of the criteria? It was already clear way before, but even more after the interviews, the identification. We need clear, unambiguous, to the point formulated minimum criteria that are accompanied by very clear but extensive guidelines with definitions and examples of good practices of how to comply and so on, that would really facilitate checking compliance with the criteria. And also in order to avoid any misinterpretations, to create a uniform assessment, a common understanding. Also related were challenges that we saw with complying with the minimum label criteria, that whereby compliance with the criteria by the joint programs is more or less beyond control of the consortium. There are criteria such as the transnational campus, whereby all students were to have access to the services of the different partner institutions. It was deemed by most of the programs not feasible for administrative reasons, technical reasons, financial reasons. The criterion on the quality assurance, whether or not your institution is located in a country or region where there is an ECA registered agency, is also beyond the control of the consortium, and so on. So not everything in view of complying with the criteria is in the hands of the consortium partners only. So in that view, we really see this label as a push for change that we also aim for or would welcome. We were able to select 3 joint programs to participate in the pilot issuing, which we are very, very happy with, and also very grateful that they were willing to participate. They have successfully issued 59 tailored, personalized label certificates to their graduates. The 3 programs are the Erasmus Mundus Master of Science in Chemical Innovation and Regulation, the Erasmus Mundus Master in Quality in Analytical Laboratories, and the International Master of Science in Fire Safety Engineering. 2 out of the 3 program coordinators are present here today and will in a bit share their experience in participating in the pilot issuing exercise. After I went through the conclusions of the work package, just to emphasize here, very important is these are 3 Erasmus Mundus programs that ended up in our selection for the pilot issuing exercise. As I already mentioned, it is not surprising, but it is EDLab's viewpoint that this label initiative is really open to all joint programs that would meet the label criteria, regardless of the framework, regardless of the setup, all joint programs that meet the criteria, although we have selected 3 Erasmus Mundus. Here are the screen printout of the label certificates that they issued from the colleagues of the Master in Chemical Innovation and Regulation, from the Quality and Analytical Laboratories program, and from the Fire Safety Engineering program. Our conclusions are general recommendation based on the work that we did in work package 4. First, on the label criteria, that is the work on the work package 2 from University of Cadiz with Laura Howard. As was already mentioned by Fernando, a lot of input was collected through a range of interviews, focus groups, surveys by different stakeholders, joint program coordinators included, and also, of course, the EDLab workshop that we had in Barcelona in January, where we finalized our set of reworked criteria, resulting in our recommendations for the criteria, mandatory criteria only, formulated quite restrictively, ambitiously in view of this push for change, clearly and transparently with clear guidelines, organized conceptually, structured into different areas related to ESG's European approach principles, and also referencing to other existing Bologna tools such as ECTS, Joint Diploma Supplement, and so on, and aligned with EU policies in general. And we are, of course, happy to see that these suggestions are well reflected in the proposal in the higher education package as was recently launched. And further information on the criteria can be found in the dedicated deliverable that I referred to on the slide. In addition to label criteria that really feed into the label and the label certificate, our conclusions are that for the future labeling procedure, we would want to avoid a duplication of effort for all partners involved, to create a lightweight procedure to be able to apply for the label, for the assessment of compliance with the criteria, to be picked up by ECHA registered quality assurance agencies, and considering that the European approach is a compulsory criterion in the criteria, we would propose to incorporate the label awarding procedure into the European approach procedures, either as an opt-in or an opt-out. That is to be further determined. As to the evaluation of compliance, we see that on two levels: evaluation of compliance with each of the different criteria, to be decided whether to do that on a 2-tier or a 3-tier scale, compliant, non-compliant, or compliant, partially compliant, and non-compliant per criterion. In view of the final decision on whether or not the program is awarded the label, we would propose to consider including a conditional advice in addition to either compliant or non-compliant conditional advice, whereby joint programs, if deemed feasible, are given the chance to remedy their non-compliance or partial compliance with some of the criteria within a reasonable time frame. If they are successful in remedying as requested, they will still be receiving the label. So the label is awarded to joint programs that comply with all of the criteria, fully compliant. As to the label certificate, so we have the logo included onto the certificate. The logo, as per EDLab's viewpoint, is indispensable as the key visual identifier to be used by different stakeholders involved continuously and consistently throughout all communication and dissemination. The label certificate, as was already mentioned, to reflect this jointness of a joint program, the transnational character, the integrated nature. And for issuing the label certificates, we opt for a clear template that is adaptable by applying the guidelines that we comprise in the guiding document, but does not impose a regulatory framework on its own, in order to keep this flexibility that is really needed given the diversity of joint programs and the context they have to operate in. Final words from my side, last slide, before I give the floor to our joint program coordinators. We managed within the EDLab project to issue pilot label certificates. Many thanks to the joint program coordinators that put in the time and effort to do so. It was quite a thorough, time-consuming identification exercise and really a thorough design also for the label certificate and the procedure that we applied for pilot issuing. The issuing exercise contributed to not only providing or writing recommendations and tools for shaping a future labeling procedures, but also fed into the discussion on the label criteria, given the insights that we gained in this exercise. So that wraps it up from my side. And I think now we can go over to a panel discussion with our joint programs to hear what they have to say. Thank you. Andries, back to you.
Thank you very much, Lotte, for providing much insight into the entire process to come to actual final recommendations, which we hope now will be taken on board in the future by member states under the guidance of the European Commission. And of course, we will be very much looking forward also to hear Jan Mijl speak later and see in what sense our exercise has been reflected in the package as was launched last week. Indeed, I think it is now time to have a talk and hear what our so-called guinea pigs have to say. With all due respect, we are very, very happy that they were willing to contribute to this entire exercise under a very short time frame. And today, as already mentioned, we have here with us two of the coordinators that were involved. The third one apologized. Regretfully, he could not make it here. But we have here today with us Professor Isabel Cavaco from the University of Algarve, who is the coordinator of the CHEER program, the Erasmus Mundus Master of Science in Chemical Innovation and Regulation. Her partner institutions are the University of Bologna in Italy and the University of Barcelona. University of Algarve itself is also an associated partner to the EDLab project. Her master has been running since 2012, and the program was established with a critical mission, notably to guarantee the safety of chemical substances found in daily products for both people and the environment. It accomplishes this by equipping professionals with comprehensive knowledge and the necessary skills to manage international chemical safety regulations, with a particular focus on the EU's REACH regulations. Our second coordinator that we have here today is Professor Bart Mercier from Ghent University, who is coordinating the International Master of Science in Fire Safety Engineering. That program has as partner universities, University of Edinburgh in the UK, Lund University in Sweden, and the Polytechnical University of Catalonia in Spain, which is has only joined recently and was not yet part of the pilot issuing, that has to be said. Now, the Master in Fire Safety Engineering is also a long-standing Erasmus Mundus program. It has been running since 2010. And it aims to reply to the continued trends towards performance-based fire safety design, and the strong need that comes with it for high-level education in broad multidisciplinary field of fire safety engineering. Now, Bart and Isabel, turning to you. Thank you very much once again for being here with us today. Your programs were taken on board to this exercise after a rigorous pilot process testing your compliance with the draft criteria as just presented by Lotte. And again, we are very grateful for your commitment to this EDLab project. Bart, your program has been awarding a joint degree since many years. Then the question, of course, pops up. What added value do you see in either the label exercise or in particular the label certificate as it has been awarded under this pilot context? Please, Bart.
Thank you very much, Andries. Before replying to the question, I would like to first say also thanks from my side to everybody we have been in contact with in this exercise. It's been a relatively light effort from our side in this context. So I'd first like to congratulate also everyone involved in this effort. But I would also like to redirect some of the words of thanks that you've expressed to us as program coordinators towards the administrative support, because obviously they also needed to work hard and a lot to get things done and to issue the labels. First wanted to stress that a bit. Now, why do we think there is still value in this? And I think it's a valid question because we are indeed issuing joint degrees since long. I think in any case, a label that expresses quality is a good thing. So even on top of the degree and the diploma, it is something that is very visible to the outside world, and that I think has multiple facets. And so I'd like to highlight a few, and then that will be my reply. So one is, if you look inside the consortium, you've mentioned our partners, and I think for all of them, something is to be said. So University of Edinburgh, it's not a secret and that the Brexit had quite a big impact on our daily lives inside Europe. But this was a country decision. Now, the Academic Institute of the University of Edinburgh has never sent any signal that they would be happy with the Brexit. So for them, I think it's useful and to have an additional label that still expresses quite explicitly the jointness in the European context. Lund is in Sweden, and in Sweden it's always been a bit more difficult to go to joint degrees, as you know very well. So I think also for countries that do still have some reservations, I would say, towards joint degrees, it is a useful step to have such a label that strengthens, I would say, the jointness, and that might be helpful actually at the national level there to further evolve towards joint degrees. And then UPC in Catalonia, indeed, they were not yet involved explicitly in this exercise, but they were kept up to date with everything that we did. And also for them, I think it's very good as a newcomer into a consortium to already sense additionally this jointness through the label. So that's, I think, a very direct added value to each of the institutes. Now, a second aspect to it is in our field of fire safety engineering, we have a number of international professional associations that have a certain home base, which could be US, which could be UK, and one of the professional associations for us is in UK. So then for all the other partners, it is useful to have a label that expresses the jointness, because if there is a direct link, in this case with the University of Edinburgh, but it could have been another institute, this also reflects in a very positive way on the other institutes, because then they will also accept more easily a student graduating from Ghent University, and we are the coordinators, and to be, say, treated in a similar way as a student that would have graduated from the University of Edinburgh, to give one example. So I can imagine that also for other consortia, such a label helps to demonstrate the very strong link. And then a final aspect, and that, I hope my reply is not too long, but the final aspect, I think, is also for the students. Now, for our graduating students, in all modesty, it's never been an issue yet to find a good job, but nobody has a crystal ball. And I would imagine that if you have a label attached or in addition to your degree, it's much easier to explain to a company anywhere in the world that this is truly a very joint program. I think this might be more difficult to explain if you only have a degree with signatures from different vice chancellors and rectors. That is all true. But if you have an additional label that is very directly visible, it makes the story much easier, I would think. So those are a few aspects that I think are worth stressing, and why we are also enthusiastic in this context.
Thank you very much, Bart. Indeed, enthusiastic is the word that I would keep in mind here after having heard you. And of course, we are very happy to hear that at least you as a coordinator are keen and very much behind this whole endeavor. Now, Isabel, turning to you, your program is also awarding a joint diploma, so it has also gone through the entire process and the difficulties that come with it to try and set that up. But may I ask to you, how different does the label certificate as awarded in the pilot context look differently from this joint diploma in terms of content and layout? Are there any particular reasons for this difference? And do you also feel that it may help in still covering some administrative obstacles, the label?
Thank you. And I would start by thanking the EDLab project for inviting me to be here. And in particular, thanking also Andries and Lotte for all the efforts managing this work package, and congratulating on the success of it. Okay, regarding the contents and the formats of the certificate compared to the diploma, yes, there are differences. There are many similarities, of course. The program is identified, the graduating student is identified, and it contains all the crests of all the universities. So all the universities have agreed on this. But the joint diploma contains all the signatures, is signed by all the universities. So we would like to have done this in the label certificate, but this would require a formal approval, a formal agreement of the rectors of each of the partner universities. So this would be another step that would delay the whole process. So we opted for having the University of Algarve as coordinator signing on in behalf of the whole consortium. So I think this is the main difference. How does this help solve administrative obstacles? Well, with the main obstacles we find on issuing, on managing the joint degrees, or at least one of the main one is indeed all the administrative obstacles in issuing the diplomas themselves. So if it is possible to solve this with simple rules for European degree label that could be independent of the local national regulations, that would solve a lot of problems. One thing would be necessary, and we are not still there. It would need to be something that is easily streamlined in the administrative machines of the universities. Because what we did in this pilot exercise was It was an extra effort of some administrative staff that we assigned to it. But this cannot be an extra effort. It must be streamlined in the whole machine. That will be another step, I believe, in the future.
Thank you very much, Isabel. And of course, that is indeed a very important point you stressed there. This has been a pilot exercise, a testing, seeing what is feasible, what lessons can we draw from this. And of course, we will soon hear also from Jan Meijl, the colleague from the Commission, on how they propose steps for taking this further in the future. Looking at the time, I wish we could have discuss this a bit further with you, and also we would have liked to have at least one student representative present here today, because of course this is also very important to hear their feedback. In the framework, under the short time frame of our project, we did also ask for some feedback from students, but we cannot have sadly a student represented here today. But I would just suggest then that we stop here because we have 25 minutes remaining, and we still have to listen to Jan Meijl. And I would hereby again like to thank you very much for your contributions, and we hope that we can still count on your contributions also in the exercise of taking this forward together with the member states, and who knows, under future projects together with the EDLab colleagues. Bart and Isabel, thank you very much once again. And Alessandra, back to you.
Thank you very much again for the input. Interesting. And so I would now give the floor to Jan Meijl. We are running a bit late, but I'm sure everyone is very looking forward to your presentation as well. So over to you to present us once again, for those of us who are familiar with it, but for the first time, maybe for many others, the blueprint towards a European degree.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. And I will join the other speakers in congratulating all the EDLab team for the really excellent work that they have been doing, especially considering the time constraints, the resource constraint that apply to this piloting exercise. It was definitely not an easy task, but you really managed to over-deliver. So really congratulations to you. I will keep my presentation short so we can keep some time for the Q&A section, because I suspect there's also a lot of interest from the participant to ask you questions. So I'll briefly introduce to you the European degree package, as we call it. So it's 3 texts that have been adopted by the European Commission. One is a communication on the blueprint for European degree, indeed. So it's really focused on the concept of a European degree and how we could get there. And then it is accompanied by 2 proposals for Council recommendations. So these are 2 proposals made by the European Commission for the Council, for representative of the member states to discuss and to adopt. On first quality assurance and recognition systems in higher education, and another one on attractive and sustainable careers in higher education. The rationale behind all this is, interlinked. On one hand, this is about cutting the red tape. You heard already about the many obstacles to transnational cooperation in higher education. So many of these obstacles also come from different quality assurance arrangements between member states, different standards, procedures that are being used, lack of automatic recognition still in the European Union, which also prevents universities to work together, to work at creating JOHN programs that they could not offer on their own. And we know how important it is now at these times in Europe to have programs being developed in a way that is agile and rapid, especially in certain fields that are emerging, in which we cannot really afford to wait for years before our universities or higher education institutions start delivering these trainings and learning possibilities. And of course, it is about using transnational cooperation as a driver for global competitiveness of higher education systems, of national systems, and also competitiveness in terms of attractive career for higher education staff, whether they are academics or administrative staff. They were also mentioned. They work enormously to make this transnational cooperation work, and they are not always properly rewarded for these commitment, this dedication that they have. It can even sometimes negatively affect their career as compared to if they did not engage in any transnational cooperation at all. So we have proposals in our proposal for council recommendations to tackle this, alongside, of course, making all careers attractive, more attractive for academics and staff, and improving quality assurance arrangements for all programs, not only transnational programs, of course. So the texts go a bit beyond the European degree, but each text supports in a way the objective of the other. So for the European degree, you already introduced the concept. We see it as really something that it is very important to clarify. This is not a degree that is to be awarded by the European Union or the European Commission. This is about degrees being awarded by higher education institutions, like all degrees. This is about being done in accordance with national law and regional law, because that's the only legal framework that exists in the European Union, and that cannot be changed in any case. This is about building on the Bologna tools. This is about offering, if you wish, an instrument. This is about offering member states a way to have a coordinated approach to the design and delivery development of JOHN programs and JOHN degrees. Now, there is not such a coordinated approach. There are some elements that exist within the Bologna context, but they do not cover everything. And they are not sufficiently implemented. So this is about really pushing member states, proposing them an approach that they can use to open up their system to transnational cooperation without having to radically transform their entire system. This is about really creating a specific track for JOHN programs and JOHN degrees, the basic rationale being that JOHN programs are special programs, and because they are special programs, they need special rules to apply to it. And these special rules will be based on common characteristics that these JOHN programs have that justify why certain rules need to be adapted to them. And these criteria, these characteristics are the European criteria that we are attaching to our proposals. So very important to reiterate, this is not to be awarded by European degree. We are not proposing a European quality assurance agency, not a European accreditation agencies. This is not about replacing national degrees with European degrees. This is about proposing an easier way to get to JOHN programs, be accredited and delivering JOHN degrees. And this is about, of course, being something that is completely up to your higher education institutions to offer. This is not going to be a condition for funding. This is also something that we hear very often as a fear. So this is not supposed to be anything that we would impose in any way. So the added value, many of you mentioned it already, so I go very quickly. For students, it's about more opportunities for transnational learning experience. There are JOHN programs existing in Europe, too few, and part of it is because they are simply too difficult, too costly, too time-consuming to develop. If we make it easier, we can hope that we'll have more of them, meaning that there will be more opportunities for the students. For employer, that was also mentioned by the previous speakers. This is about having an easy way for them to recognize, identify the value of the people that apply for a job, that would come and say, I have a European degree, that will probably speak to them more than if they were saying, I have a multiple degree in a certain area from different countries. We know that employers usually tend to not necessarily understand these subtle differences between these different type of programs. So this is also about being a way to brand your own learning experience better and getting it more valorized by them. For universities, again, it's about simplification. This is about offering you ways to pool your resources more efficiently, cut the red tape, have a wider opportunity, of course, for students. If there are more joint programs, there are more opportunities for students, hopefully also more opportunity for staff, because we also want the staff to be a part of these joint programs and support your standardization strategies. And for the EU member states, this is about reinforcing the global attractiveness, competitiveness of the European higher education area, of the European higher education systems, have a way to attract talents from non-EU countries. As well, a joint program is certainly an attractive perspective for non-EU talent students. And above, of course, keep building, fostering a European spirit of cooperation, being built on the strengths of each other. That the basic rationale behind the European Union, which is we are stronger together, and we are stronger when we cooperate with each other. Higher education in the world is a more and more competitive area, and we need to make sure that we have ways to work together simply and efficiently. So thanks to EDLab and 5 other pilot projects that all did an excellent job, really. We have collected a lot of information that we had to integrate in a very condensed timeline, let's say, but that's really created a lot of expertise in the ground, very many interesting discussions with ministries, with quality assurance agency, with student representative, that led us to different elements of this blueprint, one being the criteria of the European degree. This is very simplified. They are actually more detailed than that, I reassure you. The European degree basically talk about 3 main areas. It's about excellent transnational program organization and management, how the program is jointly designed, jointly delivered, and how well this program management is integrated between the different institutions offering it. Then it's about the learning experience for the students with some elements of interdisciplinarity, of building horizontal skills, digital skills, possibility to have labor-based learning experience, student center, of course, learning with embedded mobility, and about European values, because after all, it's a European degree, it's not an just international degree, so it also builds on European values such as democracy, multilingualism, environmental sustainability, etc. So this list of European criteria is annexed to the proposal on quality assurance and recognition system that we make. Why? Because these criteria need to be discussed by the different member states. And one way to make them discuss these criteria is to simply put them in a proposal that they will have to discuss in the context of the Council. The member states will probably reply to the communication as a whole, but they are not necessarily going to discuss every single detail of it. They will probably adopt conclusions on the communication, where they will probably take position on the way forward and give us a mandate to continue the work. But they are not going to discuss every detail of the proposal. So we really wanted to have them discussing this criteria, and that's why we put it, the list of criteria, as an annex to the proposal on quality assurance and recognition system, which is now the step 1 where we are today. We have made the proposals public. Now it's for the member states to take them, discuss them, adopt, and from there we can move toward the other steps. A very important step will be the development of implementation guidelines toward a European degree. There, it's about defining each of these criteria very clearly, setting indicators for the evaluation, because someone at some point will have to evaluate if these criteria are met or not by the different programs. And for that, we want to set up a European degree policy lab. And we want to build on all the expertise that have been built in these pilot projects. So we certainly hope to see many of the colleagues in the pilot projects in the European degree policy labs. If they wish to continue working with us, we'll be delighted, and extend it also to different quality assurance agencies, ministries, to have their participation, because open dialogue is absolutely essential in this endeavor. So this is something that we are planning to launch sometime this year, still to kick off the start sometime later this year. And from there, when we have a discussion first at the European Council on the proposal for a Council recommendation quality assurance and recognition system, which will have hopefully adopted a set of criteria, as well as given the European Commission the mandate to continue the work to go forward, and implementation guidelines done by the European Degree Policy Lab. We can offer the different member states to decide whether they want to have this European degree as an actual degree that they will allow their higher education institutions to award on this basis. So in that way, the checking of the compliance of the criteria will be done at the stage of the accreditation of the program. Or if they want to start with a simple label, in which case the label will come on the top of a program that was already accredited according to the regular national and regional rules. Both would have exactly the same criteria, so the procedure could be integrated in accreditation and quality assurance processes. It's just that the final outcome would be different. Why? Because a label does not require necessarily, except very few cases, any legislative reform. You can allow a label to exist. You just have to put in place the processes to award it. While the degree itself would require legislative and administrative reforms. So we understand this is a process that not every member state may be ready to undergo. And maybe they want to start small with a label, and little by little, they can envisage a European degree as a degree. So it's really an approach that would be flexible enough for different member states, different regions, to decide how they move toward the European degree. So what we will plan to do to support it is, as I said, set up a European degree policy lab, which would be to develop these implementation guidelines for the European degree. So it's really about the work of expertise to really have a solid common basis for the implementation. So it is done according to clear guidelines. It is done the same way across the EU. As I said, it's not the EU that's going to do this check. It's going to be done at national, regional level. So it is important to have clear guidelines that everyone can apply in a way that is compatible and similar in every member state. This is about being coordinated, not about being centralized. We're planning to set up a European degree forum, which would be an annual event gathering the people, of course, for the European Degree Policy Lab, the different policymakers, to take stock of the progress. We can already imagine that the first European Degree Forum would be about presenting these implementation guidelines, for example, but we could also envisage that this European Degree Forum could be the place where all these reforms that are engaged by the member states are also put in the light, where still obstacles existing are also displayed and discussed by the different policymakers. Because what we also learned from this policy experimentation is that in many cases, the barrier exists simply because no one is aware at policy level that they exist. Or it's not something voluntary that member states put barriers for their own higher education institutions to cooperate, of course. It's just that sometimes they are not aware of these barriers. So it is important to have this open dialogue with them to keep us updated on what each other is doing, and make sure that also member states work in a way that encourages them to be compatible with what the others are doing, to keep in mind that we are all evolving in a European higher education area, and it is important to not do things completely differently from your neighbors if you want to keep open the possibility to cooperate with each other. Then, of course, as I said, there will be a lot of work to be done toward a European degree, whether it is by, of course, higher education institutions that would wish to establish such programs, and that's why we envisage to have European degree design measures that would be take inspiration for the Erasmus Mundus design measure that exists already, that are basically about providing financial support to create a joint program, because we know there is a lot of, well, administrative work to be done there. There's a lot of staff days to cover. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort to create a program before it can be offered to students. So we want to offer such kind of support. This is going to be discussed in the context of the Erasmus Plus annual work programs. And we also would like to support member states and their accreditation and quality assurance agencies in putting in place all these different processes that they will have to put in place, or the reforms, if they would decide to go for reforms, to put in place to allow the European degree to exist. Because I have said again, it will need to rely on processes for quality assurance or accreditation of programs. We don't want to duplicate the way things work at the moment. We really want to have this light add-on to the evaluation of programs. And this is a way through the European Degree Pathway project that we would support those that are brave enough to be the trailblazers to adapt their system so they can make it possible. Now, I'll stop speaking here. I could have talked to you more about the other proposals, but I'm afraid the package is so big and your interest is probably so big that I will stop presenting now and give you back the floor, Alessandra.
Thank you very much, Yamael. And again, thank you also for those of you who are watching us and listening to us. So now we have time for questions, and my colleague Andries is going to moderate a little bit the question and answer. So I see that we already have some questions in the chat, so I will give it over to Andries to share the questions among the panelists.
Thank you. Indeed, some questions have come in already. And of course, we are very happy to see that some of the recommendations that were forwarded by our project have also been taken on board, as presented by Jan-Maël, not in the least also this idea to foresee some kind of action to support joint program coordinators, the so-called design measures idea. Of course, depending on the approval of the Erasmus Plus work program, but we are hopeful that this will take place. And one particular question that came up that is related to this is the fact whether this action would replace the Erasmus Mundus design measure, or would it exist next to it? Jan-Maël.
Well, in the first phase, it will certainly exist next to it, because not all Erasmus Mundus programs are expected to become European degrees, and not all European degrees are expected to be Erasmus Mundus programs. So the two actions would coexist. At some point, there would be merit probably to see how there could be a single application that would then go toward the European degree or Erasmus Mundus design measures. But at the moment, it's really envisaged as something that is separate. Yes.
Thank you. Then we also had a question that was gauging very concretely to the timeline. You referred to the work that is to be taken up in the future. In particular, when would the Council discuss the topic? Would that be under the Hungarian presidency or at another moment?
Well, this is difficult to say because this is completely in the hand of the Council. the Belgian presidency is really stuffed with initiative. It's also a very short presidency because of the European elections coming up. You know, it's a special year. We're going to have a change also of commissioners at the end of the year, probably with a new college. So we don't know for sure. We do expect that they will react to the communication, maybe still under the Belgian presidency. And then the two proposals would be discussed under indeed the Hungarian presidency. I think they have expressed interest for putting it on the agenda. That would be particularly important for the European degree, especially the one on quality assurance and recognition, because it is there that the Council should give mandate to the European Commission to establish the different things that I presented to you.
Thank you very much. So we are looking forward indeed to some very important steps to be taken under the Hungarian presidency, because indeed the trajectory has of course already been one of a few years in which now in this very concrete year of a project a lot was done, but we should importantly of course not lose out on this momentum and keep this momentum going. Looking also at the questions, we had one question that's related to the PhD level, which is of course a bit of a specific one. The entire exercise of the criteria was focusing on the 3 EQF levels, including the PhD level. One question basically referring to the fact, from how many institutions would need to be involved in a joint program in order to have it also at the PhD level, such a label. I assume here that there is no distinction in the criteria, that we have the minimum criteria of 2 institutions, both at the EQF levels 6 and 7, but also at the PhD level. But in general, our project, of course, advised where possibly to distinguish out the PhD level. Jan-Maël, I don't know if you wanted to provide any input on that as well. Is that some feedback that you received also from other pilot projects?
No, this is exactly what you said. So in the criteria of the European degree, as they are proposed now, the minimum number of partners are 2 from 2 different countries. It fits the definition of what the joint program is. And I see that the question is also about what measure exists to support it. At the European Union level, we have the Maria Skłodowska-Curie action that is supposed to support the development of joint program. There's room for improvement in the number of applications received. So I really encourage you to apply if you're interested in this funding scheme. And of course, the European degree design measures would also apply to this level.
Thank you, Jan-Maël. We also have a question, and looking at the time, because we are, of course, running to the end of the webinar, but since we were entirely responsible ourselves for going a bit over time, I take it that we can still have a few minutes, if that's fine with you also, Jan-Maël. What would be the approach to institutions that are situated in member states or regions where the European approach on quality assurance is not yet fully implementable, for instance, because the Quality Assurance Agency is not ACAR registered?
Well, yes, indeed, that would be probably an issue that the member states should look carefully at and make it available for the higher education institution. The point being that quality assurance is an extremely important element of any joint endeavor, and we already have very solid basis to work one with another. This is about the European standard and guidelines for quality assurance. This is about the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs, all done in the context of Bologna process. That member states, ministries have, in theory, all committed to apply. Then some of them are still lagging behind. And in a way, the European degree would be a push, a momentum to make this available in the countries that do not make it available yet. An important point to consider is that the European criteria for the European degree do not necessarily make the use of the European approach for quality assurance programs mandatory as an external evaluation process. If you are in a country where the European approach is not available because all the institutions are self-accrediting and simply don't need any external evaluation, that is perfectly fine. The criteria says that the standards of the European approach are used. So in that case, as long as you can show that within your own internal quality assurance system, you do apply the standards of the European approach for quality assurance of joint programs, that is perfectly eligible and compliant with the criteria. So it does not make any procedure mandatory, just the use of the standards. Then where it is needed, external evaluation needs to be done by an ECHA registered agency. Where it is not needed, then it is done by the institution themselves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We have a related question on that because, of course, acquiring accreditation is one thing, but it's also the fact that the label itself comes in a way on top of that. The related question is hinting at the procedure. If all the institutions involved in the offering of the joint program would be self-accrediting, do they then still need to go to an external, or would they then still need to go through an external procedure for the label? How is that dealt with in your proposal, Jan-Mael?
Well, in that case, which actually would be a fantastic case for transnational cooperation, these self-accrediting institutions would be allowed to deliver this label based on their own internal quality assurance system, which means that at some point in their institutional evaluation, it was checked that they have the internal procedure in place to carry out this assessment. So this would be something that would be checked at the level of the institutional review of the different institutions. And as long as this is fine, which is most likely going to be the case, then they do not need to have any external additional procedure to award the label.
Mm-hmm. Simplification is the aim, I hear. But we also have another very interesting question in the chat, which is related to the fact that there are now two pathways, two starting points, two entry points. How would this look in practice? Is it upon the member state or the region to decide for their region or country what approach they would choose, or is it up to the higher education institutions? And what if you have joint programs that combine partner institutions that are situated in different contexts, where one country or region decides upon the one and the other on the other?
Yeah. No, the way we see it is that the member state or the region would decide what they would make available, because otherwise they would create two parallel systems with the same standards, and that would be probably a bit confusing. So higher education institutions will have at their disposal the framework that has been allowed by the different member states or the region. Now, in the case where there is a cooperation between a partner where the European degree is possible and another one where it is not, well, I suppose that then the common denominator would be the label, but you can very well imagine that in one country the degree, the program would be accredited as a European degree. From that country perspective, in the other country, it would be recognized as a regular joint degree, not necessarily a European degree, but you can allow it to receive the label on the top of it because, well, it is de facto compliance in the other country says it is a European degree. So it would be a situation where it will be a joint degree that in some countries has been accredited as a European degree. In some countries, it has been accredited as a regular joint degree. But in the end, the difference won't be that big because it will still have the same kind of characteristics. And in terms of visibility, the difference will be minimal, especially if the degree template can be a bit flexible.
Thank you. Yeah, sounds enlightening. And we are looking forward to the further implementation of these ideas, of course. I'm sure there will be still a lot of discussion on that. Looking at the time, so we are running a bit over time. Jan-Maël, if you would allow us the honor, can we ask you one final question? Which is related to the criteria. Somebody observed that the criteria on the one hand are rather technical, administrative, procedural, but on the other hand, there's also reference to European core values, which is a much more content-related criterion. How do you foresee content-related criteria being taken up in quality assurance procedures?
Well, this is where the work of the European Degree Policy Lab will be particularly important, because we have to define what these criteria mean and how we can check whether a program is compliant or not. Indeed, some criteria can be ticked as almost yes or no question. Are you two partners or more? That's an easy answer, yes or no. When it comes to democratic values, when it comes to multilingualism, when it comes to how inclusive, if the program has some measures to promote inclusiveness of the program, then it becomes, of course, more than a yes or no question. And there we have to ensure that the guidelines do not only address these questions as a ticking box exercise, but gives indication on how to check this. For democratic values, for example, some of the pilot projects already refer to existing international text that could be used as a reference in order to check whether the institution itself in which the programs are offered have express some commitments to these democratic values, some international standards. When it comes to multilingualism, it is important to be flexible and to say, well, that can mean different things. That can mean, for example, providing language courses to the students. That can mean providing some of the teaching activities in another language than the dominant one. That can mean really different things that then we should leave up for the evaluators to assess, provided that the guidelines are clear and sufficient enough. It's also in line with our recommendation on quality assurance and recognition system. Don't take quality assurance as a ticking box exercise, but really as an exercise where we look at quality and where quality assurance evaluations are also used to suggest possible improvement, enhancements of the programs as a feedback. So it's not only a yes or no exercise, but really an exercise to promote better quality overall. So these are going to be probably the most interesting criteria to discuss within the European Degree Policy Lab, but I'm quite confident that we can manage to have guidelines that are meaningful, feasible enough, and flexible enough to have a meaningful evaluation exercise.
Thank you very much, Jan-Maël, and good to hear that you are confident that indeed we can take this further, even after a quantum leap, so to say, within a project of 1 year, where we provided, as a project together with the other projects, a lot of input already, but clearly this is not the end, and this is just another step in the roads toward our final goal. We've done our best to reply at the majority of questions that popped up. We would like to thank the people that contributed with questions. They were very relevant and to the point. We've not replied to all of them. This was not possible within the time frame. As I said, we already ran out a bit of time, for which we apologize. But we hope nonetheless that we have contributed to your understanding of the project on the one hand and the proposal of the European Commission on the other hand. And with these words, Alessandra, I would like to give you the floor back.
Yes, thank you very much again. And it has been really a pleasure to listen also to the different perspectives of different stakeholders involved. And I just invite you again, as Fernando mentioned at the very beginning, to follow our website and the news, have a look at also the reports and the recommendations that were produced by the EDLab project. Also, for those of you who are in Italy, I see many connected from Italy. We look forward to seeing you next week in Padua at the final national event on this topic, and Yamel will be there again online. So thank you again for this, and for all the others, I hope we can see some of you in the final event in Brussels on the 29th of April. So really looking forward to that as well, and we'll be in touch and very happy to hear what is next on our agendas and your agendas as well. So thank you once again for being with us, and see you soon, hopefully.